Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says understanding citizens' reluctance to pay taxes. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. When it comes to running the affairs of the country, the government requires the finances. So what does the government do? The government imposes taxes. The government imposes taxes, one on the corporations, the other on the individuals. But when we look at the individual level, most of the individuals in a region or in a country may want to evade the taxes. They may not want to pay the taxes to the government of the respective regions and the country. Why? That is because they believe that they are not the beneficiaries of the government schemes and programs. They are not able to derive benefits from such a scheme and program, and as a result they would want to evade the taxes and they may not want to pay the taxes. So this article currently goes on to say, if we are able to bring an awareness about the benefits of paying the taxes, you would have people who may pay the taxes, says this article. Let us try and understand what is the author trying to convey. When we speak about the classical theory of benefit based taxation, what does it speak about? It says that people would want to pay the taxes, they wouldn't want to evade the taxes primarily when the benefits are received by the people. So the government is collecting, let's say, about 100 crores, the government is collecting, let's say, about 200 crores. If people are sure that the money collected is indirectly coming back to them, they are the beneficiaries of the government schemes and programs, that is when they wouldn't want to evade the taxes, they would ultimately want to pay the taxes as well. Even if there is issues with respect to the taxes, they may also let go as well because they believe that they are the ultimate beneficiaries of such a scheme and program. So the classical theory of benefit based taxation clearly says that if the benefits are to the taxpayers, they wouldn't want to evade the taxes and they may not appeal against the taxation system as well. Added to it, they will also want to be paying more as well. Why? Because they have realized that ultimately they would be the beneficiaries of the government schemes and programs. However, there are individuals and communities which have a misperception about the money being spent by the government. What do I mean by it? The government collects about 100 crores. This 100 crores has to be split into multiple areas of economic activities. It can be the defense, it can be the communication, it can be the infrastructure. All this will have to be ultimately borne by the government for the welfare of the people. But the community and individuals feel that the government is not spending enough for the welfare of the people. So what does the author say? The author in this particular case goes on to say that an awareness has to be created with respect to the people, where their money is spent, how much it is spent, where it is being used, and how they are the beneficiaries of it. If an awareness is given to the people, to the individuals, to the community in that region, ultimately people may not evade the taxes, and ultimately, since they feel that they would be the beneficiaries of such a scheme and program, they would be ready to pay taxes in the near future, says the author. So basically, what should the government do? The government should give information about how tax revenues are being spent by the government and should offer detailed information on the various programs. So it is not just about revenue generation. Where are you spending the money? Where is the expenditure? Who is responsible for it? We have an opaque process that is there. This has to be eliminated, and what we require is a transparent process. If the government is kept check, if there is accountability in the system, and if the government is projecting with values and showing it to the people, people will be ready to pay taxes and they would not evade the taxes, says this article. So this particular study, which was taken care in the United States of America in one of the regions, clearly points out that if people are the beneficiaries, whether they are generating benefits from the health schemes or the education schemes or the public distribution system, whatsoever it is, if they are able to generate the benefits from it, and if the government is able to prove it via the statistics, and if the entire system is transparent and legitimate enough, in such a case people would not evade taxes and ultimately pay the taxes, is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says unguided missile. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. We did recently discuss that there was an accidental firing of a missile from India where it unfortunately happened to land in Pakistan. We did also speak about the protocols and agreements that are in place when it comes to the missile testing, and we did also discuss that India regrets this particular issue and will also ensure that actions are taken inquiry is conducted as to why there was this accidental firing of the missile. However, we did also discuss in our yesterday's CNA as well that Pakistan does not want inquiry only by India, but it wants what is called as the joint inquiry, and it has also asked for the international inquiry as well. While all of this is happening, what we have to understand is the fact that in the past, when it comes to these missile tests, India has been able to garner the support of the international countries. India's global image of being a responsible nuclear power has been built over the decades, and this should not be ignored because of few missile tests, says this article. So this article goes on to say the security of the India's nuclear command and technical capabilities has never been in doubt. India's credibility has never been questioned. India has not transferred any of the nuclear missiles or missiles that are required for another country in an illegal manner. So the global community has been able to trust us. The global community believes in the credibility of India because India has sustained that image on a global platform, which is why India also became part of the missile technology control regime. So what is this missile technology control regime? This was established in the year 1987 by the G7 industrialized countries, which included USA, UK, Canada, France, Germany, Japan, and Italy. Why was it established? That is to slow down the spread of the missiles. Initially, the focus of this particular regime was to prevent the transfer of nuclear missiles from one country to another. Over a period of time, apart from the nuclear weapons, chemical weapons also came into picture. You also had biological weapons as well. So initially, the emphasis was to prevent the transfer of technology from one country to another, where special emphasis was laid on nuclear weapons. But over a period of time, chemical weapons, biological weapons were also added as part of the missile technology control regime. So basically, it is about controlling the transfer of technology of all these missiles from one country to another. How does the MTCR work? Basically, you have about 35 members. All these countries are the members of the MTCR, and India is also one of its members. So when it comes to its operations, every member is supposed to establish what is called as the national export policy for the ballistic missile, cruise missiles, unmanned air vehicles, space launch vehicles, drones, remotely piloted vehicles, sounding rockets, and underlying components of the technologies. So all of this, if it has to be transferred, a country will have to ensure that there is a national policy of its own. So this can be compartmentalized into two categories. One is what is called as category 1. The other is what is called as category 2. So what is this category 1 missiles? It means that that particular missile is complete in itself. So this is a complete equipment. But when it comes to the category 2, it can be some parts, it can be some materials, it can be some components. So when it comes to export of category 1, it means a complete product is being exported from one country to another. If we consider category 2, it can be just a component, it can be just a material or a technology which is transferred from one country to another. So the MTCR basically looks at regulating it, and how, for which what we require is a national policy, and this can be bifurcated into category 1 and category 2. What if a country violates the MTCR? Are there any rules and regulations? Rule breakers cannot be punished under this particular regime. However, national policies, national rules can come up. For example, when we speak about the United States of America, it has come up with its own laws where sanctions can be imposed on those companies and governments that export MTCR controlled items. On a whole, they do not have any laws, but when it comes to individual countries, they have every right to impose sanctions on such countries which are barred under MTCR controlled items. This is what we have to understand with respect to MTCR, where it is not a legally binding treaty and it is only an informal political understanding. India applied for the membership of MTCR in June 2015 and became the member in 2016. But do remember, China is not a member of the regime, but India is part of the MTCR. What are the benefits of MTCR? India's space program will get a fillip as ISRO will now have access to restricted high-end technologies for developing cryogenic engines. India's arm exports will be enhanced as of now because India can export BrahMos to Vietnam and other nations. This will help India procure Israel's Arrow 2 missile, which will help develop India's ballistic missile system. India can buy surveillance drones from United States, and India can give a boost to its Make in India program as well. And why did the countries accept India into MTCR? Because we have a transparent system. India is a responsible nation. India happens to be responsible for all its actions, and since they knew that we would not export the technology or some of the nuclear missiles to another country, which is why India was accepted. So this article currently goes on to say that since India is a responsible nation, going forward such accidental firing should not happen because the global community has trusted, and such accidental firing should be avoided, says the first part of the article. The second part of the article also speaks about another accident which happened back in the year 2019 in the month of February. What exactly happened? Indian Air Force and Pakistan Air Force were engaged in a dogfight. During this particular period, India also happened to use Mi-17 helicopter as well. But over a period of time, in what could be a friendly fire, we shot down our own helicopter. So this incident is also what is called as blue on blue incident. So what is this blue on blue incident? It basically means that we attack our own equipment, we accidentally harm our own forces. So what exactly happened? As this particular issue happened in 2019, it was suspected that Mi-17 and its personnel were shot down by the friendly fire, which also means that a blue on blue incident took place, and the court of inquiry looked into it and confirmed yes, it was the Israeli origin Spider which happened to be launched, which is a surface to air missile system, and ultimately we hit our own Mi-17 helicopter. So what this also points out to is that the accident has happened on the external sector, but the accident has also happened on the internal front as well, where there was a friendly fire, which was a blue on blue incident where we attacked our own personnel because there was a security lapse and a technical lapse, a loophole when it comes to the operations. Now the question is, how do we identify whether an aircraft is that of an enemy or our own aircraft? For which there are different types of methods that are used to identify the friendly aircraft. This includes visual sightings, radio transmission, designated entry and exit points for all our aircrafts, and we also have a transponder based identification friend or foe system. What is this friend or foe system? Basically, it will help in identifying whether it is our own aircraft or it is that of the enemy. So every aircraft will have a transponder. The transponder based identification device helps in communication with the ground radars. So what would happen when it comes to the transponder? What do? They communicate with the ground radar, they exchange all the encrypted codes as well, and we would be able to know whether it is a friendly one or an enemy one. So what do we have is an encrypted code between the radars which are ground based and the aircraft which is flying in the air. What led to this friendly fire? This identification friend and foe system was found to be switched off, which happens to be the first major hurdle, and the second, the chopper was not directed to safe zone by the traffic controller, and as a result an unfortunate incident of friendly fire happened within India. So after this particular issue happened, all units and bases were given strict guidelines by the Indian Air Force, and all of them had to be complying by the standard operating procedure. In fact, the Indian Air Force also issued directives to all the aircrafts coming into land that their identification friend and foe system should always be turned on and should never be turned off, says the Indian Air Force. So what do we see on the external side? What we have had a recent accident. On the internal side, we've also had an accident. So such accidents should be avoided going forward, for which what we require is a standard operating procedure and an institution which is able to see through it, and if there are any disturbances, the same will have to be corrected, is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says no ovation for India's stand on the Ukraine war. The article here is speaking about India's position when it comes to Russia and Ukraine war. When it comes to this whole crisis, the author takes into perspective two important perspectives. One is that India has what is called as geopolitical imperatives when it comes to Russia and Ukraine crisis. It also has what is called as foreign policy principles when it comes to this particular crisis. What is this geopolitical imperatives? Russia has stood by us. Russia has also helped us in the past. Russia is one of the countries which has also supported India as well. So looking at the interests of India, India was supporting the cause of Russia. This is what is geopolitical imperatives. Added to it, India has what is called as some of the foreign policy principles, which is non-violence, which is ahimsa, which is about self-determination, which is about that particular country not interfering with the affairs of another country. All this are part of the principles of foreign policy. So in this particular case of Russia and Ukraine, India has reimposed faith on the geopolitical imperatives and not on the principles, which should not have been done by India, says the author. So if we look into the author brings into picture number of narratives. What are these narratives? One, he takes into picture the victim of territorial aggression. Let's take the example of 1962 war. Who was the aggressor? It was China. Who happens to be the victim? It happened to be India. So going forward, we will also have China, which will be an aggressor state. India may also be a victim as well. But the point that the author is trying to make is that when it comes to the aggressor, we should always question the aggressor. So in this particular case, Russia is being the aggressor, Ukraine has been the victim, so India should have questioned Russia. So the author says if we are drawing a parallel, China will be an aggressor and India may be a victim. That is what happened in the recent LAC crisis as well. We did not go for the war. China provoked us and it also killed as many as 20 Indian soldiers. So the author in this particular case draws a parallel and says India should have opposed the aggressor, drawing a similar parallel to India. The next argument the author brings is in reference to the Pakistan issue. What exactly happens whenever Pakistan has taken India to the United Nations Security Council? Who's helped us? It is Russia. Why? Because when it comes to the Pakistan side, they have China, which has the veto power. So we require one of the countries, and that country happens to be Russia. So in the likely support to India against Pakistan, it is Russia which has stood by us in the past. So India may have gone ahead and abstained from the voting because Russia has helped us in the past is the second argument. The third argument the author speaks about is high dependence of India on the Soviet Union for the defense equipments. When it comes to the defense equipments, of late we have diversified our sources. We have imported aircrafts from France, we've been importing guns from Sweden, we have imported ships from United Kingdom, but historically we have had a very good genuine relationship with Russia. Most of our equipments are also sourced from Russia, which happens to be Soviet Union earlier. This means that in the present situation we are supporting Russia primarily because of the high dependence on the defense equipment from Russia. In fact, the S-400, which is a missile defense system which has been ordered by India, is also coming from Russia as well. So the author says historically it might be right, but going forward India need not worry. Why? Because we have diversified our imports from multiple countries. Even if we require some components to some of the equipments, it can be sourced from other countries. So India need not have to go by Russia's side, says the author. This is the third argument. The fourth argument says as India does not intend to expand its territory, it need not rely on any particular country that is a permanent member of the Security Council to support its future plans. When we look into the second argument, we have always looked into that argument that Russia has supported us in the past, but going forward, Pakistan may take India's cause number of times to the United Nations Security Council. Most of the countries know that India is not an aggressor state. So going forward, they also know for the fact that India will not capture any other country or its territory. So we do not require any of these symbolic gestures from Russia. So in this particular case, India should have actually notified and should have condemned this act, says the author. The fifth argument says that this has become the conflict between the East and the West, and India should stay out of it. The idea being that it is the conflict between the West and Russia. How? You have United States of America, you have all these Western powers who are actually criticizing Russia for this aggressive act. On the other side, Russia is also criticizing NATO for their actions as well. So this is a conflict between the East and the West. Why is India involving? So the author says we have a principle called as the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, where the world is a family. So there is a weak family member, there is an aggressor state. So should India condemn or not? Why? Because when we say the world is a family, Ukraine is part of the family. Since the aggressor is the person who's done this act, illegal act, India should have condemned it. Added to it, we also believe that India is a Vishwaguru, as said by the Prime Minister. So being a teacher, India should have condemned this very act, says the author. Finally, the author brings out a perspective that when it comes to Russia or China, these are the authoritarian regimes. The presidents have given themselves a lifetime for their own presidentship. So this article says since India is a democracy and people in India value democracy, we should have supported Ukraine. Why? Because these are the authoritarian regimes, that is China and Russia are authoritarian regimes. So we should have gone with Ukraine, supported this aggressive act by Russia, says the author. These are the arguments made by the author with respect to this article. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says the functioning of the ISS after the sanctions. What is it all about? We have the United States of America, which has imposed sanctions on Russia. Why? Because Russia happened to be the aggressor state, Ukraine happened to be the victim of it. As a result, United States of America imposed a lot of sanctions. As a result, their economy is coming under a lot of stress, where Russia has now responded to these sanctions by saying that the International Space Station operations may be a problematic area in the near future if United States of America continues to impose sanctions on Russia. Let us try and understand what is this issue all about. When it comes to the International Space Station, there are different agencies which are part of the International Space Station. One, what we have is the United States of America, represented by NASA. Then we have Russia. Then we also have Japan, represented by Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. Then we have European countries, represented by European Space Agency, and finally what we have is Canada, represented by the Canadian Space Agency. Every country which is part of the International Space Station has its own role to play. When it comes to Japan, Japan provides an experimental module called Kibo, which has a unique facility exposed to the space environment. When it comes to Canada, it provides a robo arm used for ISS construction or for the device exchange. So every country on its own plays a very important and critical role when it comes to the operation of the International Space Station. What is the role of Russia when it comes to International Space Station? Russia's part in the collaboration is the module responsible for making course corrections to the orbit of the ISS. What happens? Due to its enormous weight and the ensuing drag, the International Space Station tends to sink from its orbit. What exactly happens? We have the ISS which orbits in a particular motion. It also has a fixed trajectory as well. But because of the gravity, since the ISS is not in a zero gravity space, it does encounter a bit of gravity. It loses a lot of energy as it makes its moving in that particular motion. What happens? The ISS may fall down. It may sink down. So it might be in motion at a particular height, but because of the gravity, because of its weight, it may fall down. And what does Russia do? The Russians periodically send the thrusters, they attach themselves to the ISS and impart the required momentum to keep it going. So if at all it falls because of the gravity, because of its weight, it is pushed up to its original line of motion every now and then by the Russia. So it alters the path of the ISS to also avoid the collision with the space debris. As we discussed in our previous CNAs in the last week as well, we did discuss about the space junk and the debris. So in order to keep the space debris away from the ISS, Russia also provides the assistance. Added to it, Russia also ferries the astronauts to the International Space Station from the Earth and back as well. So it sends the astronauts from the Earth to the space station and back from the space station to the Earth so that they can conduct all the scientific experiments. These are some of the functions that are performed by Russia when it comes to the International Space Station. With these sanctions imposed by United States of America, Russia has now responded where it says the state corporation will not cooperate with Germany on joint experiments in the Russian segment of the International Space Station. Roscosmos will conduct them independently. It further says Roscosmos will not service the remaining 24 R-180 engines in the United States and stop supplying the R-181, which is important for the operations. So basically, we have Russia which has responded to United States of America's sanctions. Does it mean that they would not be able to operate? They would be able to operate. As of now, we have the SpaceX Dragon module and the Boeing Starliner which can dock with the ISS. The Starliner also has the capacity to carry 10 tons of fuel to the International Space Station, and we also have SpaceX which has also said that it would be able to send these astronauts from the Earth to the International Space Station and carry these astronauts from the International Space Station to the Earth as well. Therefore, if Russia withdraws from the International Space Station, yes, the operations will be interrupted, but in the near future, they may also buckle up and the cost of the operations may also go bit costly as well. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says, ahead of Ramzan, North Africa faces food crisis as prices rise. What is this article speaking about? We have number of countries in Africa which import wheat and agricultural products from Ukraine and Russia. Because of the war, they are not able to export from Russia and Ukraine to these countries, and as a result, over a period of time, the prices of the commodities may increase and ultimately people may have to go through some hungry period is what is this article all about. When we look into the background, Russia and Ukraine are the major suppliers of food commodities such as soya, bean, wheat, barley and sunflower oil to the African countries. In the year 2020, African countries imported agricultural products worth about $6.9 billion from Russia and Ukraine amidst the soaring prices. How does this work? Basically, most of the wheat is imported into Egypt, and from Egypt it is spread to other countries of Africa. The shipments to Africa are made from the various ports along the Black Sea. Since there are issues in and around Black Sea, they are not able to export. Countries like Libya have been facing the issue because 75% of its wheat come from Russia and Ukraine. Morocco also relies heavily on the same source for the supplies, and Algeria, which happens to be Africa's second largest wheat consumer after Egypt, does not import any from the two warring Eastern European countries. So this happens to be better placed as well. What is the impact of this particular issue? Because they are not able to get wheat and other agricultural commodities on time, this has increased the inflation in those countries, and this has also resulted in hunger and unrest in these countries of Africa. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Russia used phosphorus shells in Donbas attacks. What is this article speaking about? It says that Russia has been accused of launching phosphorus bomb attacks on civilians in the eastern part of Ukraine. Now the question is, what is this white phosphorus? White phosphorus is also known as tetraphosphorus. It is a toxic colorless white or yellow waxy solid with a garlic-like odor. It is dispersed. It is used in artillery shells, bombs, rockets or mortars used primarily to obscure military operations on the ground. What do we mean by it? Let's say, for example, if there is military operations that have to be conducted in one of the areas, but people should not be taken by surprise initially. They should also not know that military operations are being conducted. So what happens? The white phosphorus is used in that particular area. It creates a smoke screen in that area. So indirectly it means that the military would be able to come into that particular area and would be able to conduct the movement of the troops. So what is happening here? India, with the use of the white phosphorus, they are able to keep themselves away from the people for that initial period of time. Added to it, white phosphorus is also used in a particular location so that this points to a particular target, and aircrafts can drop bombs at that particular location where the white phosphorus has the smoking effect. Whenever the white phosphorus is used, it is also a signal for the attack or the evacuation. Now the most important question is white phosphorus part of the chemical weapons convention? It has not been categorized as a chemical weapon by the international agencies. However, international organizations and international treaties and law also bar that these should not be used in the civilian area. It can be used in an open area, but it should not be used in a civilian area, says number of international protocols. Why? That is because the minute there is air bursting of the white phosphorus in overpopulated area, what could happen? It may cause skin irritation to the people. It can also cause thermal and chemical burns as well. And when the white phosphorus comes in contact with the skin, this may also lead to phosphoric acid being created, which has a highly corrosive effect on the human skin. So because it becomes an irritant, generally it is assumed that it should not be used in the civilian areas but can be used in the open areas. Now if you look into this article, the article also says that phosphorus bombs are called by the name flaming onion. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. An effective way to improve tax compliance could be to improve the provision of benefits and make the government more accountable. Analyze. Next question. Discuss the protocols and agreements in place between India and Pakistan for regulating missile tests. So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and do give positive feedback to your friends' answers as well. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.